Unsolved Crimes newspaper, as a response to Kavalier civil society organization, within the framework of a struggle against religious extremism, presents.
I studied religion in Korea. My focus has been on Christianity and Confucianism, but I've also focused on religious change.
Donald Baker, professor in the Department of Asian Studies, University of British Columbia, former director of the Center for Korean Research, Vancouver, Canada. Mr. Baker, would you mind telling about your activity as a researcher on religious studies in Korea? What was the reason of this choice?
So I began by studying traditional religions, but in the last 10 years I've been looking at some new religions, in particular Won Buddhism, but I've also looked at a more controversial religion called Taesinchilihue. I look at Taejongkyo. As an historian, I find it interesting how religions go from being considered a cult to becoming a respectable religion. The religions don't change, the opinion of them does.
There are certain problems that has been gaining worldwide spread since long. Today is not a secret that in most cases labeling individuals, organizations, religious groups as a sect and cult is done without a reason, mostly based on rumors. What is a sect, a cult? Could we call this term scientific?
Not scientific at all. They're simply an expression of religious prejudice. People use those terms to refer to a group that doesn't agree with their religious beliefs or that seems to challenge the traditional religions. But I'm an historian. Christianity was called a cult when it first began. Okay, so it's just a derogatory term used by people who are trying to protect the religious status quo from new religions that might challenge that status quo.
As far as I know, your research field is Buddhism, and new religions in Korea such as Downworld and Dizun, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. However, as you have written, in contrast to Buddhism, these religions are called cults and considered dangerous. What do you know about it? Why they are considered as cult? What is dangerous in them?
Again, because they operate in non-traditional ways, Won Buddhism is no longer considered a cult. It's respectable. Taesinchilihue is still criticized heavily because they rely on their everyday believers to recruit new members, even though they don't use brainwashing, which doesn't really exist. They don't use force. Nevertheless, they are challenging the traditional religions by doing that. And that frightens the traditional religions, so they're called a cult. They are trying to overcome that by creating universities of their own to give themselves more respectability.
Could you tell us who is the one taking these groups and labeling them, and on what basis are they doing it?
Okay, well, there are actually two different types of groups that are doing that. There was a Christian group that was attacking deviant Christian groups, in other words, new branches of Christianity in Korea. I'm not sure if that's active anymore because the leader of that was actually killed. He was murdered by a member of one of the groups he had criticized. The non-Christian groups are often criticized just in the popular press and the general media, not by any specific group. In Korea, Christianity is very strong in Korea, especially fundamentalist Christianity, and they criticize some of these new groups as being tricks of the devil.
Regarding the second part, what is the reason mass media are attacking the group? Are they supported by government or what?
No government support for these activities. South Korea has religious freedom. It's primarily what you have in Korea are some very extreme Christian groups that get very upset if someone they know, particularly a family member, joins one of these new groups. The problem is not coming from the government. It's coming from one end of the religious spectrum against the other end. Mass media is totally free in South Korea except in regard to discussing North Korea. They can say anything they want about South Korean society, including religion. The government does not interfere.
There is a European NGO, FECRIS, which has numerous branches all over the world and has been fairly aggressive and radically opposing with many religious groups and organizations which often don't even have a relation to religion. Would you consider this type of activity legal?
Whether it's legal or not, it depends on the laws of the country in which it's operating. But whether it's acceptable or not, I would say it's not acceptable to engage in behavior that attacks other people for their religious beliefs.
Do you think that after these unethical attacks, they ought to bear criminal responsibility?
Yes, I think the religious groups have the right to sue. If false charges are being made against them, they should go to the courts of their country and sue groups that are making those false charges and force people to retract any defamatory remarks they make about these religious communities.
Mr. Becker, what is a fake risk in your opinion? A struggle of the truth, a business, a governmental policy, or the new religion?
I didn't know anything about it until I read the material I received yesterday, but it looks to me like it's a private organization that receives government support to engage in activity government should not be funding. In other words, it has religious motives because it's trying to protect traditional religion, but it's doing so in a way that's contrary to basic religious principles. It is therefore a private organization with government support acting in unacceptable ways, causing more trouble than it should. It should be creating peace in the world rather than stirring up trouble.
My next question about vice-president of FACRIS is called Aleksander Dvorkin. A number of experts from Europe and Russia state that their activity as a whole is an extremist one. Would you mind share your point of view about such a kind of opinion?
From what I've read about him, he does seem to be an extremist. Anyone who considers Buddhism to be a cult shows complete ignorance of world religious history. Okay, he seems to be devoted to protecting Orthodox Christianity in Russia. And the way he's doing it is, his language does appear to me to be quite extremist, and he deviates from the truth, from the facts. He creates his own facts, which is very dangerous. So I would not consider him a reliable source for information about religious movements.
Do you know that Dvorkin and people like him position their opinion as scientific? This way disqualifying actual real scientists. And masses that see all this in media start thinking that they are actual scholars.
I think most social scientists and religious studies professors would find what he's doing is not scientific. It's more of a product of personal prejudice. I think what you have to do is try to counter him in the public sphere by getting your own people on television and radio, by getting your own articles in magazines and newspapers, to give people another perspective so they realize that this person is saying things that are not accurate and that are actually divisive and dangerous.
As far as we know from European and Russian experts is that long ago FACRIS used deprogramming as one of tools that is a violent way of making a person quite a certain group. Now deprogramming is considered illegal in many countries, and it was replaced by an exit counseling, but mainly with the same purpose. For example, in Russia there is a psychologist, Aleksander Neveev, who calls himself a sektologist and is quite active in this kind of activities. Can a psychologist such as Neveev give experts' opinion in the field of religions, sects and cults?
I think psychologists can tell us why people are worried about things, if they have mental problems, but they are not experts in what is a cult means a fake religion. The psychologists are not experts in what is a real religion and what is not. They have no right to determine that. That should be left to scholars of religion to determine, not a psychologist. Anybody who thinks they have the right to put pressure, psychological pressure on another person to change their religious beliefs, first of all, doesn't understand why people join religious organizations in the first place. They do it of their own free will. That is their right as a human being. And we should not put pressure on people just because their religious beliefs are different from ours and our religious beliefs we would prefer they not have. That is, as long as they are not harming other people, they have the right to their beliefs. And therefore any attempt to use pseudo-psychology, I would call it, to try to change their beliefs is a violation of human rights.
Let's talk about the role of mass media. if journalists tried being more objective before making any information public? Do you think things would be different on worldwide scale?
Journalists have a problem. They want to be seen as neutral, so they report what people say, but they should have an obligation. If someone says something that is so contrary to fact, they should point out that other scholars, other experts disagree with that statement, to give their readers both sides of the story, rather than letting one person present their one-sided views without any challenge.
Would you mind sharing your opinion on how could one protect himself from fake attacks?
I don't like getting involved in a shouting contest. If you can ignore the group, that's the best thing. If you can't ignore them, then rather than arguing with them, put your own information in the public sphere. Invite reporters, for example, to come to your religious headquarters and watch your services and meet your believers, to see that people are not being brainwashed. They're not robots. They are believing of their own free will, and that the slanders against them have no basis in fact. So it's counter information rather than attacking the attacker. It's better, don't lower yourself to the attacker's level. Instead, rise above them and rely on simply explaining yourself to the public that they are also trying to influence.